You, Mr. Frost.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, thank you so much for being here today. You know, when I was back home in the district over the weekend, everywhere I went, the grocery store, walking around the park, doing anything, people were coming up to me asking about Social Security. And I think a lot of people are worried and scared right now. I think part of it has to do with a lot of the mis and disinformation that's going around. I mean, we've heard this constant lie from Elon Musk that tens of millions of dead people are getting Social Security paychecks. Claiming fraud on Social Security, I think, is one way that folks are going to justify cutting it, pocketing the benefits for billionaires, privatizing it. Ms. Koselleck, Elon Musk is now calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme. How concerned are you that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme?
I don't think we have seen indications in our work that that is the case.
Musk is calling it a Ponzi scheme as an excuse to destroy it, in my opinion. Americans earn Social Security through years of hard work, and it's a good investment. It could be a better investment for black men because we're pretty much donors because we live less time, but that's another conversation for another time. It's one of the most popular government services, and most people support more funding for Social Security, not less. Ms. Wagner, you know, people want shorter wait times, payments processed more quickly, but at the same time, the administration wants to cut 7,000 employees from the administration. Yesterday, somebody from my office called Social Security, 30 days to process something on retirement, 30 days on Medicaid, 230 days as it relates to disability. What would be the effects of these cuts to the Social Security Administration right now?
When staff shrinks, there are fewer people to take appointments, to answer phones, to process applications for different benefits, and that hurts people nationwide. And in addition to their own staff, Social Security Administration funds state disability determination service employees who decide whether applicants' disabilities are severe enough to qualify for benefits. Their processing time was already at a record high of 7 months, and we expect cuts will have further impact. In addition, 7 in 10 of Social Security staff do serve the public directly. So this will have a major impact on customer service.
Thank you. It's not just, you know, billionaires like Elon Musk who are going around attacking it. My own Florida Senator Rick Scott, the richest person in Congress, which on the topic of fraud, you know, my senator made history. He's the man responsible for the largest Medicare fraud in the history of this country, $1.7 billion. He says that Republicans are, quote, going to have to cut Social Security, end quote. Why are they doing this? Well, to take money from Social Security to use it for tax cuts for people who are too rich to need it. House Republicans plan to make $880 billion in cuts to health care. This means cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, too. Ms. Wagner, 4 in 8 American children are Medicaid recipients, including over 60,000 people in my district alone. For an Orlando family currently receiving Medicaid, what could be the financial fallout from losing access to Medicaid?
Well, first, when states are forced to cut back on funding, they are going to cut back on who's eligible and the benefits they receive. But cuts will have broader impacts than just those who are no longer eligible. They will directly or indirectly affect the amount of funds available for state staff, for IT systems that support Medicaid, and they'll probably lead to more improper payments and reduced program integrity. And it will impact people whose eligibility isn't cut. Longer call center wait times, more errors, uncertainty, stress, and possibly not being able to get approved for benefits or losing coverage at renewal, even though they remain eligible.
Thank you. You know, before coming to Congress, I worked in organizations, and one of the proudest things I did was work at March for Our Lives. It came after the shooting that happened in Parkland. I traveled this country speaking with people that disagreed with me on the issue of gun violence, but it made me a better person. And something I learned during my travels is in order to speak about something in a bipartisan way, I think it's really important to make sure people are coming at this on the right foot in good faith. And I'm all for the modernization of our government. I think it's really important. And I say that as the youngest person in the United States Congress. I think it is very important. But when I see the people leading the effort, like Elon Musk, call something like Social Security a Ponzi scheme, and I hear crickets on the other side of the aisle, I have a really hard time taking any of this seriously when I go home and I have people coming up to me in the grocery store who are living paycheck to paycheck, asking me, what are you going to do to protect Social Security? So thank you so much, and I yield back.
recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Humir, so we've seen under the Biden administration the failed open border policies that really fueled and exasperated the immigration crisis, the illegal immigration crisis in my home state of Colorado. And the previous administration released at least 11 million illegal aliens and at least 100 known terrorists, and estimates indicate 250,000 to 585,000 pounds of fentanyl into our communities, Colorado being the #2 state in the nation for fentanyl overdoses, really fentanyl poisoning. Most of these folks aren't seeking after fentanyl, but they're being tricked into taking it. How do you believe that the Biden administration's policies empowered terrorists and these terrorist organizations like Tren de Aragua to commit violent crimes against American citizens, especially in places like Colorado and Aurora?
The Biden administration's immigration and border policies provided a magnet for all kinds of criminals and terrorists to basically say the border's open, we're going to move in, and that empowered the enemies and adversaries of the United States, including nation states, to then steer those migrants to be able to come into our country. Ms. Congressman, you mentioned the Tren de Aragua. The Tren de Aragua is uniquely a phenomenon of the Biden administration. It did not exist inside the United States prior to 2021. In fact, most of the Venezuelan migration that was leaving that country since 2014 fled south, through South America. But because the Venezuelan government was able to establish both a land bridge through the Darien Gap, a once uncrossable border between Panama and Colombia, and an air bridge into Mexico, they timed that because they knew that President Biden was going to open the border. Now we have Tren de Aragua in 23 states, including your state of Colorado, and they've captured, killed, and raped all kinds of Americans throughout the country.
Thank you for highlighting that this is a new problem that we weren't encountering before with this gang presence in our country. And now recent reports have been about leaks taking place within law enforcement, sensitive information detailing the ICE raids targeting illegal criminal aliens. How do these leaks affect law enforcement efforts to keep the country safe?
I'm familiar with a leak that happened in your state in Colorado that was a major raid. That was more than 400 agents that were deployed to basically take down the Tren de Aragua and apartment complexes. That not only puts at risk the law enforcement officials that are engaged in that raid, but it puts at risk the entire community because it allows that gang to figure out the leaks, the vulnerabilities in our law enforcement system. What I'm very concerned about, the Tren de Aragua in particular, is very adept at co-opting government officials. They've done this throughout countries all throughout South America because they use this later to be able to create media apparatuses, other kinds of propaganda to defend their interests, which is through illegal migration.
Yes, and a question that I did want to ask you, how does it help or hurt when members of Congress see this and engage in the leaks and prop them up and then even have special town hall-like events where they're telling illegal aliens how to remain in the country?
Well, they're either wittingly or unwittingly aligning themselves with that transnational criminal organization's strategic objectives.
Thank you. Ms. Doyle, in Aurora, Colorado, we've been talking about the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, and they were tied to incidents at multiple apartment complexes where violent gangs, they had events like home evasions, shootings, kidnappings, assaults, and extortion for rent payments. And just last year, 9 suspected TDA members were charged after a violent home invasion into an apartment complex and left 2 victims seriously injured. As a legal advisor under the Biden administration, did you ever advise anyone that we should be doing something to prevent this kind of gang activity in our communities?
I'm unable to discuss due to my ethical obligations to confidentiality any advice I give.
Are you not here as a principal legal advisor?
But I cannot break my confidentiality for any specific advice. I will tell you that we always focused on national security and public safety and supported the brave and hardworking law enforcement officers of Immigration Customs Enforcement and Homeland Security Investigation.
Did you ever advocate for coordination between federal law enforcement officers and local and state law enforcement officers?
Yes.
Well, we have in Denver and in Colorado 2 different multiple statutes that prevent that coordination. So were there conversations, and are you still advocating, if you were, to have those sanctuary policy laws removed so we can have that coordination?
Each community should be able to determine themselves what works for their community. As we mentioned, holding Boston up as the safest large city in the country.
Well, I think our
which
federal
does
laws
not allow.
would keep our communities the safest. Our federal laws are on the books and say that they should require state and local law enforcement officers to collaborate with federal immigration authorities.
I think
However, the Biden
local-
administration empowered sanctuary cities, and as a legal advisor, I would just assume that you are part of the empowering of places like Denver to pass these ordinances. Is that true?
Local mayors, cities, towns, and the states should be able to determine their own policies and their own approaches. And while we work for ICE, yes, we always encouraged cooperation.
I believe federal law should be
possible
followed at all
within
costs. Thank you, ma'am. My time has expired.
The gentlelady yields, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to keep it to 5 minutes. Ms. Doyle, you taught, you're an immigration attorney?
Yes.
Okay, and you teach
worked in
immigration
immigration.
law?
I have in the past, yes.
And you were a legal advisor to ICE?
I was, yes.
Question, do you support President Trump's policy to designate cartels as terrorist organizations?
I think that by designating.
It's a yes or no. Do you support President Trump's policy to designate cartels
I
as...
support focusing on national security.
Do you support President
dealing with our
Trump's
immigration.
policy to designate cartels as terrorist organizations?
I think it is important
Yes or
to
no?
focus on national security.
Okay, should illegals who are here illegally, who rape American women and girls, should they be deported? Yes or no?
Individuals with serious criminal convictions such as that are deported every single day.
Oh, no, they're not. What about murderers? Do you think murderers should be deported?
Murders are also subject to deportation.
Okay, so there is a sanctuary sheriff named Kristen Graziano in Charleston County, South Carolina, who refused to work with ICE, and she was letting criminal illegals out on the street who were raping my constituents, raping women in Charleston, in South Carolina, pedophiles, child molesters, murderers out onto the streets of South Carolina. This is happening in Bright Red, South Carolina, the sanctuary sheriff. So they aren't being deported because there are sanctuary mayors. You want to quote Mayor Wu as being this gift from God about safety. I mean, she was literally like praising or sending her condolences to a knife-wielding maniac trying to murder people on the streets of Boston. It's crazy to me. And here you have a law degree. You have done advised on immigration to ICE, and you can't even say whether or not you want the cartels to be designated as terrorist organizations. You're hiding behind some little lofty quote about national security, which is not really making a whole lot of sense. One of the things I did want to fact check some of my colleagues on today is this idea, it's been said by multiple people online in this hearing today, that it's not illegal to come here illegally. Well, under Title 8, it actually is. Title 8 USC 1325 about the improper entry of an alien. It is breaking the law when you enter here illegally. And our witness, Ms. Doyle, cited in her opening presentation the 10th Amendment, that it gives absolute control to states and cities and counties to handle the immigration issue. It actually doesn't, and if I'm shocked as an attorney that you don't know the law, because it says under the law in multiple places, especially in long-standing Supreme Court precedent. But the 10th Amendment says the power is not delegated to the federal government or reserved for the states. Congress' power to regulate immigration primarily stems from Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4. And that is the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. And under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. I'm not even an attorney, and I could easily look that up. I think we need to have higher standards for those who are lawyers and also practicing law and teaching law to our students, because there's a long-standing Supreme Court precedent also that's recognized Congress as having plenary power over immigration and not actually the states. And plenary means absolute control. So last year, I exposed a sanctuary sheriff who was doing day after day after day, months after months. I exposed her for releasing the worst of the worst, the most violent, those illegals that were committing the worst possible crimes. I fought to get rid of this sanctuary sheriff, Kristen Graziano, when I had documents sent to me by a whistleblower, and I ended up talking to multiple sources about this. I was one of the only elected officials that called out our sanctuary sheriff in South Carolina, Kristen Graziano. No one in statewide elected office, not my Attorney General Alan Wilson, not my Lieutenant Governor Pam Yvette, if you're listening and you're watching, you stood by silent as a sanctuary sheriff let out murderers, let out rapists, let out child molesters and pedophiles out onto the streets of South Carolina. It was wrong, it was unethical, it was illegal. I had 145 Democrats vote against my bill, the Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act. 145 Democrats voted against deporting those who are here illegally, the worst of the worst, murderers, rapists, pedophiles. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. I did it in record time today.
The gentlelady yields. Congresswoman Boebert is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Humir, so we've seen under the Biden administration the failed open border policies that really fueled and exasperated the immigration